Pokémon. We almost all grew up with it. Whether it be from the trading card game, to the small video game franchise, to the anime, to the honestly ungodly amount of Pokemon merchandise sold anywhere that sells anything even a little bit vaguely Japanese. But in case you can't tell, I love Pokemon. Like the normal amount for a 21-year-old woman in college with a child. Often I hear complaints that Pokemon is too easy. A game for babies, a mash A simulator. But I'm here to change your mind. So let the educational record show that Pokémon is not a game for babies. So, first off, we have a problem. Pokémon is a game made for babies. Not quite in the literal sense of the word. You can't give an infant baby a Nintendo Switch controller and make fun of them for not understanding the totally normal and reasonably sized type chart. Which I may or may not have memorized like a normal human who loves this game a normal amount and is not near any spectrums whatsoever. I don't know why you keep saying that. Stop it! But, yes. Unfortunately, the reality of the situation is Pokémon is a game made for children. It's rated E for everyone, and the gameplay loop is inherently very simple due to the extremely limited constraints of its original hardware, and the target demographic of school children trading over a Pokémon Link cable to help each other complete their Pokédexes. I've been in love with Pokémon since basically grade 1. My best friend collected Pokemon cards, and I'd go to his house and we'd place his cards all around the room and pretend to be Pokemon trainers catching them. Did I understand the concept or rules of the card game? Not even a little bit, but I loved those pieces of paper so much whenever I could get my grubby little paws on them. When I was 16, I got my first Nintendo handheld, the Nintendo 3DS. It was toward the end of the franchise's life on the console, moving to the Switch with Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu, later Sword and Shield and now Scarlet and Violet. That didn't stop me though. I saved up all of my money and went to Walmart and bought myself my very own copy of the latest Pokemon game, Pokemon Ultra Sun. And ever since I picked my very first first partner Pokemon, I've been irreversibly and forever in love with this franchise. As I get older, I start getting deeper and deeper into it and falling down rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole, which I'm now gonna make your problem. Have fun! I'm gonna say something controversial. Pokemon battling is more complicated and in-depth than chess. I know you're all looking at the screen like I'm absolutely insane and crazy, and to be honest with you, that's so valid I probably am, but let's at least hear me out here. A Pokemon has 4 moves that for the most part all do something different. On each turn a Pokemon can use one of their moves, and whoever goes first is determined by a Pokemon speed stat. All Pokemon have 6 stats, which I don't have time to explain in depth here, but I'll give you a brief rundown. Speed determines which Pokemon goes first in a battle. HP is the health points of your Pokemon. Attack and defense are how good you are at taking and dishing out physical moves, like Mach Punch, Ice Punch, Thunder Punch, Fire Punch, Sucker Punch, Jet Punch, Focus Punch, or Baddy Bad. Guess, this is a real move. Special attack and special defense are basically the same, except for any move that's like a big ol' energy blaster, fireball, or a planet-destroying nuke from the most powerful being in the multiverse. A Pokemon battle has 2 formats. A single battle, where it's 2 Pokemon on the field, 1 on each team, and double battles, where each side has 2 Pokemon out at a time to use in battle. That's it. There's no more. Leave me alone! If you're a casual player, you're more likely to be familiar with the single battles format, as that's the one that's most commonly used in the games, being used for catching wild Pokemon and for most gym battles and trainer battles. 4 vs 4 double battles, however, are the only competitive formats supported by Nintendo with their VGC competitions. So that's the majority of what we're going to be talking about today. Now, if I were to ask you how many Pokemon there were, how many would you guess? 151? 300? 400? 1,025. So, right now, in a competitive Pokemon team of 4, there are 20,736 possible combinations of Pokemon. Now imagine those Pokemon can learn, on average, 73 possible moves each, with 4 moves per Pokemon. That's, a lot of combinations. Now, if you've played much Pokemon, you may be thinking, in a competitive setting, there's not really 1,025 Pokemon because that's counting pre-evolutions, and who would want to use a weak Pokemon that can still evolve in their competitive team? Well, turns out, in late 2022 and early 2023, most people. During that time, an abysmally weak unevolved Pokemon named Murkrow found itself as the second most used Pokemon in competitive battling. This is due to its ability Prankster, Abilities are basically additional things that your Pokemon can do, which can range from lowering your opponent's stats upon entry into battle to bouncing status effects back onto your opponent's Pokemon. Prankster allows Pokemon like Murkrow or Tornadus' non-damaging moves to go first, using a system called priority moves. There are up to 5 priority tiers, which only come into play if 2 Pokemon use priority moves at the same time. Most of the time you won't have to worry about it because most moves like Quick Attack and Aqua Jet, as well as abilities like Gale Wings and Prankster, are +1 priority. This raises the question, however, Kenzie, what happens if 2 Pokemon use a move with the same priority value? Well friends, that's where Murkrow's stats come into play. Murkrow has what would generally be considered abysmal stats. Its attack would be passable if Murkrow was some kind of bulky Pokemon whose job it was to sit on the field and absorb damage while dishing out enough damage on its own to be meaningful if played around. However, Murkrow's defensive stats are even worse than its attacking ones. Murkrow's best stat is its speed at 91. For reference, all of the evolution's best stat is 130, so generally that's what I consider the baseline for a good stat on a fully evolved Pokemon. While now 91 isn't anything to look at when considering modern mainstay Pokemon like Regieleki or Urshifu, but those Pokemon don't have Prankster. The way priority is calculated in the case of Priority Tie is the Pokemon with a higher speed goes first. And while Murkrow's speed stat isn't anything special by itself, it's the highest of any Prankster Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet Regulation F, before any faster Pokemon, like Whimsicott, got added to the game in the Indigo Disc DLC. There's a very popular non-damaging move in doubles that Murkrow is famous for using called Tail Whip, which doubles your entire team's speed for 5 turns. Using Murkrow on your team allows you to outspeed other Prankster Tail Whip users like Tornadus or Thundurus, and boosting entire team speed stat and winning a lot of people very many games. The thing about Pokemon is when new Pokemon games come out, not all Pokemon get their passport and get to fly out to the newest region, allowing Pokemon like Murkrow or even Pachirisu to flourish, even though Pokemon like Whimsicott that are objectively better and do the same thing already exist. And while power creep is a problem in competitive Pokemon, the thing that makes it so interesting is no matter the problem that you have, there's always a way you can combine Pokemon to create a solution to that problem. And then that team gets popular, and then teams that are created as a solution to that problem get popular, and that becomes a loop, unlike any other game you've ever seen before. Is multiplayer not your thing, but you find the process of overleveling your starter and just mashing A to be too simple and not enough of a challenge? You wish you could add more heartbreak into your Pokemon run? Let me introduce you to the Nuzlocke. A Nuzlocke is a Pokemon run with a bunch of self-imposed rules. There are a million variants, but the only 2 consistent rules of a Nuzlocke are as follows. You can only catch the first Pokemon you encounter on each route, you must nickname your Pokemon so you get emotionally attached to them, and if a Pokemon faints, they die forever! Well, technically Pokemon can't die in any game, but you're supposed to release them back into the wild if they faint so your actions have consequences, and you can cry at a children's game.
It's time for Mewtwo. It's time for Mewtwo. Oh yeah, that's why I was gonna say give the Quick Claw to Mewtwo, is because if you could proc Quick Claw and then have the flinch.
What did I say, Brayden? What did I say?
What the fuck?
What did I say?
I thought that's sturdy.
Jesus Christ! I'm never listening to you! Ever! Ever! Literally never! Not once has your advice ever helped me!
If you've ever heard of a Nuzlocke, it's likely from the thriving Nuzlocking community online, with channels like Peachow or AlphaRad or SmallAnt, but most likely you've watched the fantastically animated Nuzlocke of Pokemon Platinum by Jaden Animations, which has 91 million views as of recording this. Nuzlocks are so cool to me because they signify the true love of the fanbase for this franchise, coming up with their own community rule sets to make the game more challenging and fulfilling for those in adulthood and those who consider themselves more hardcore gamers. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is one of the only competitive games to have the meta completely shift every couple of weeks, and I think that seeing a community work to create something constantly evolving out of their love for the game is absolutely amazing, and I'm so happy to be a part of the Pokemon community. Also, shiny hunting is autism bait, and I'm never going to be free from its clutches. Thank you, goodbye.